all of the corpses disappeared into the planet. Bodies were thrown into furnaces or composted into much-needed growth medium. And not all of the missing persons had died. Some were found on another platform where no one had expected them to be, or drunk or high, under their bed or someone else's, or transformed in some way or another, and pursuing a new life under another name. And some of them were never found. Most of them were never found. Exiting Valdegeld's main station, Mossa felt the route to Pleitis' rooms tugging at her, as though it were illuminated on her mind map of the platform. She shook her head at herself. Pleitis probably wasn't even there. She would be in her office, poring over her data and calculations, as an ecosystem extinct for centuries repopulated in her imagination. The thought summoned an image of Pleitis coracled among her cushions, entirely ensconced in the workings of her mind. Mossa had never loved being ignored as much as when it allowed her to observe Pleitis abstracted. Later, Mossa started down Supel, then took the turn toward the speculative campus. For now, she was in Valdegeld to investigate a missing student. Perhaps, if she searched long enough, it would plausibly be too late to go home. In the image in her mind, Pleitis raised her head from her work, looked at her, and smiled. Mossa smiled back, baring her teeth into the cold wind blowing down Waylow Road. Perhaps Pleitis would welcome her without the excuse. Perhaps she wouldn't be asking too much, or promising more. Perhaps, tonight at least, she didn't need to work that late. Chapter 1. It was the sort of lecture I liked, a topic that I knew enough about to follow easily, but little enough about to feel like I was learning. Although it was a modernist scholar, speaking on what was, technically, a modernist topic, the literature of alienation over the past 2.5 centuries, it was closely enough linked to classics via an explicit comparison to writing from the last decades of life on Earth that it had been allocated one of my favorite lecture halls in the classical faculty. The seats were warmed, the glass covers on the gas lamps were an ancient and kindly yellow, and a tea service, authentically brought from Earth generations ago, shone on a sideboard amid chafing dishes and covered trays, promising cheering refreshment. And yet, I was having difficulty maintaining my concentration. My mind drifted like fog, from the delicate wordplay of Zindplister, to the system of gas piping keeping the cushions toasty, to the net of rails girdling this permeable planet, to the latest species micromap I had populated for my own research, tiny dots like a cross-stitch, satisfying to complete, yet ultimately useless. 2, with an effort of pouring myself back into the present, the erudite punning of Candela Rune, whose work spanned the transition, to the precise varieties of dainties likely to be lurking in the tiered trays by the teapot, to the words of a dead man who had accused me and mine of excessive comfort. Annoyed, with myself as much as with the dead, I glanced at the wall, where a crafted, cog-bound timepiece detailed the progress of no less than 7 classical calendars and mechanically demonstrated the placement of sunlight on a rotating model of Earth. A small dial in the lower corner indicated the local time on Giant. Not much longer now. I dragged my mind back to the lecture, meditated on the anachronisms of the tea service design, then moved on to a leap, but the thought, like the dainties, had been lurking for some time. The probabilities of my seeing Mossa that night, slim, or any night before I chose to betake myself to Sembla on Earth Day Eve, not much broader. I was still meditating on that concern, with a curl of fancy into how that meeting, should it happen, might unfold, when the lecture ended. Still somewhat dazed with my warm imaginings, and more relieved than I would have liked to be that the talk was over, I gathered my largely unused block into my satchel and made for the tea table. There were the tomato chutney tarts I was fond of from previous talks at this hall, and lovely little custard wagons.